All right, so this is Andrew Himes. I'm the Director of Collective Impact at the Carbon Leadership Forum, and this is the the meeting of the Embodied Carbon NGO and Government Roundtable. Our objectives for this meeting, as for all of them, are to share news, strategic plans, resources, and tools related to embodied carbon, to report planning and future dates for conferences, webinars, and meetings, to inspire and facilitate ongoing communication and conversation among key leaders related to embodied carbon, and finally, to encourage convergence on shared embodied carbon terminology, data standards, benchmarks, and targets for embodied carbon reduction. And we've got a packed agenda this morning with, I think, 21 people on the list to give us short reports about what you and your organization are doing related to the reduction of embodied carbon. And so we're going to get going. And as we move through the agenda, I'd like to ask everybody's help in restricting your remarks. Just give a brief update and tell us the most important things. And then we're going to want to ask everybody to place the links to that you're referring to related to documents or events or initiatives in the chat window. And then we'll be sharing both the video recording and the chat contents with everybody who's on this call. The first folks that we have to chat with us and tell us what's happening about a really important new project, or not a new project, I guess we're about a year and a half into it, are Katie Poss from Building Transparency and Michelle Lambert from our CLF staff. And they'll be reporting together on the ECHO project, Embodied Carbon Harmonization and Optimization project. I'll ask maybe Katie, you can kick it off and then and say something about what Building Transparency is up to, and then Michelle can join you and you can both talk about the ECHO project. And I'll make both of you the co-hosts to do that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Andrew. Michelle, I'll just share my slides if that's okay with you, and I'll start with the BT update and quickly, and then we can move over into Echo. Let's see here. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, well, I'm very excited to report that our team, in collaboration with Kieran Timberlake, are hard at work at developing Tally V2.0. We expect this to be released to the public around Q2 of 2025, and also very excited to share that it will be free and open access. We're working on some new data sets that will serve as the background in Tally. We're working on new features to make more interactive in-tool reporting more streamlined and seamless. We're also working on alignment with industry reporting standards and adopting the ECHO schema, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. And so just stay tuned for more updates on that front, but we're very excited to be making some updates to Tally. If you're not aware, it is a whole building lifecycle assessment tool and Revit plugin. Okay, I'm going to go back in my slides and let Michelle kick us off for the ECHO update.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. I believe that we have given updates on the ECHO project on this group before, but as Andrew said, it's a really exciting time for the ECHO group, and we have just released a couple of really exciting publications. So Katie and I are just going to very briefly talk about those. But for those who have not heard this before, the ECHO project is a collaboration of all of those organizations that you see on the screen. It stands for Embodied Carbon Harmonization and Optimization. And the name is exactly what the goal of ECHO is to harmonize the collection of data on embodied carbon emissions and harmonize aligned reporting across the organization's commitment programs and various project certifications from the organizations that are on the screen. So Katie, if you want to go to the next one. ECHO came together a little over 2 years ago now. And the first year was convened by Architecture 2030. I think Vince and Aaron are on the call. And then the second year in 2024, Carbon Leadership Forum took over as the convener, essentially just to continue to bring together the organizations. So the goals for 2024 were to continue convening the ECHO group through the second year, to develop a governance and decision-making structure in order to be able to publish together as a group and have a process for doing that, which we did. And then the production of some consensus-based documents, publications around aligning embodied carbon data collection, reporting, and then discussion around the adoption of those publications by the organizations in ECHO. So we, Katie and I, and everyone who's involved are really proud that we did, in fact, meet that goal and published two documents in the last couple of months. And then the final goal is for then the ECHO organizations to start the adoption of those, the schema and the LCA requirements. Next slide. And I think that's you, Katie, talking about schema.
Yep. So last year when we first, I guess it was about a year and a half now, time flies when you're having fun, but when we first convened, we discussed what types of resources would be helpful to create in support of this mission of harmonization and alignment and how we're reporting embodied carbon information. So one of the deliverables we thought would be useful was an aligned approach for reporting whole project LCA results in a consistent format. So in order to achieve this, a working group was formed with various representatives of ECHO members, and we evaluated existing reporting frameworks. So think about like the LEED whole building LCA credit, ILFI zero carbon certification, SE 2050. We also looked at CLF's benchmarking study reporting format. We evaluated various project level LCA standards and looked at different database structures as well. So through collective development, extensive meetings and discussion over the course of a year, as well as an external review process, we established the ECHO Schema V1.0, which was just published in Excel format just a few weeks ago, along with a white paper called An Introduction to the ECHO Reporting Schema. Now, within the schema, there are minimum required fields, and there are also fields marked as recommended, as well as several optional fields. We do not envision that any single program will necessarily adopt every single field. There are more than 500 of them. But what we do foresee is that programs that wish to be in alignment with the ECHO schema will adopt at a minimum those fields designated as required, and will strongly consider the recommended fields if it makes sense for your individual program. For example, there are fields that recommend reporting for operational impacts, but not all programs are looking to capture that information. The schema was also developed with infrastructure and site work and landscapes in mind. So there is a column denoting whether a field is applicable to the infrastructure or site workspace. We're very excited about this milestone of getting the white paper and the Excel version of the schema published, but there is more work to be done to support adoption in various tools and databases, which I'll discuss a little bit more after Michelle shares about the most recent publication. Michelle, do you want to take this one, or is Megan on the call?
I don't think Megan is on the call, so I'm happy to take this. And I did just put the link to the ECHO project website in the chat. And if you go to the publications tab, you'll be able to download the essentially 3 publications that Katie and I are talking about. So the second publication, these really are companion publications and were developed very much in collaboration and alignment between the various working groups within ECHO. And so the second publication is really about project LCA lifecycle assessment requirements. And what this working group did was to look at 29 different commitment programs, certifications, standards, policies, benchmarking initiatives across North America. So all of the work that we've done in ECHO has been focused on North America. Andrew, do you want to mute everybody else just in case they don't know they're off mute?
Yeah.
Thanks. And so the group did a really in-depth analysis of these 29 different programs, and sort of came up with a state of play with across LCA in North America, and then has published in this document recommendations for 10 key areas within Project LCA. And it's also, I think, important to note that project within ECHO means buildings. It also means infrastructure projects or landscape projects. So it goes beyond the building in this effort. And so in each of those 10 topic areas, you'll see an absolute minimum, what the ECHO group has determined as the absolute minimum within that topic for doing an LCA. The strongly recommended category is where we hope that the practice of LCA will be. And then future considerations is as we look towards the next evolution and evolution of some of these commitments and LCA tools, where we would like to see life cycle assessment go. So in the document, you'll see, a description, a narrative, and then all of these charts for all the different topic areas where you can pretty clearly and easily find all of the recommendations that the ECHO group made in each of these areas, down to a very specific level of detail. I think, I don't want to take up too much time. Katie, do you want to go to the next? Okay.
Yep.
Next phase of ECHO.
Yeah, next steps, we're certainly not done. I mean, these resources are useless if they aren't put to use. So on the schema front, we are currently working with various tool developers who are working on converting the ECHO schema in its current Excel format into various coding languages. We have just recently set up an open access GitHub repository, which will house all of this code, so that any tool or database developer can go there and freely access it and implement it in your own tool or database if you wish. It'll also have some implementation guidance for developers. We are also exploring a partnership with another group called the Global Building Data Initiative. They're a group over in Europe that are planning to develop a database to ingest project level LCA results globally to support benchmarking. Also looking to extract material quantities and are taking it a step further beyond what the ECHO schema currently has. So we're excited about seeing how we can partner and collaborate with them. And I guess just a call to action, and Michelle, if you want to wrap us up with anything else, I just wanted to encourage those of you who are either conducting project level LCAs, or if you're an owner, just to encourage sharing of those results in as much detail as possible. And also just want to encourage everyone on the call to dig into both of these resources and papers. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
And then the only other thing I'll add is I see there was a question in the chat about how to join the ECHO group. And there's a couple of ways to stay informed and also to be involved. So on the ECHO project website, there's a place where you can put in your email and then make sure to get notifications and updates about what's happening with the ECHO project. In terms of other organizations joining, we feel like we're still very much in the midst of, as Katie said, we're working through a couple of other strategic collaborations, and have just finished up these publications and are looking to the next phase of implementation. So organizations that are interested in being a part of ECHO can email me. I'll put my email in the chat. And then once the group comes to a place where we decide, whether or not to expand the group and have another workflow, we'll reach out to those organizations. So I'll put my email in the chat for that.
Great. Thank you very much for that inspiring update. And now we'll move on to our next presenter. And by the way, I'd like to ask two favors of everybody here. The first one is, would you please put your name and your organization in the chat window so that we can all see everybody else who's participating this morning? And secondly, if you're willing, I'd love to see a lot of actual, real, live, three-dimensional smiling faces in windows instead of just names. if you're okay with that, please turn on your camera so that we can all feel like we're part of a group of human beings this morning. And finally, I'd also like to ask just here's a final request
Hello.
or suggestion. If you can remember, what's the last flower that you saw? What's the name of the last beautiful flower that you saw? And so now we'll move on to our next presenter, Emily Coleman from King County, Washington. Emily, I think this is the first time that you've joined this call, and I'm partly because King County is my county. I live in Seattle here. We'd all love to hear what King County is doing to lead on embodied carbon.
Thank you, Andrew. I don't have a presentation. I didn't realize we do that, but I will just, you can look at my beautiful face while we do this. So my name is Emily Coleman. I work for King County specifically within our wastewater treatment division. That might seem a little odd for this group, but we are actually the agency that was voluntold to lead on our strategic climate action plan requirements for embodied carbon. So we have been working on that, specifically focused on concrete. In our wastewater treatment division, we use a lot of concrete, if you can imagine.
Emily, your voice is fading. If you could speak more directly into the microphone, that might help.
Okay, let me see if I will put mine. Sorry.
Is that better?
That's definitely better. Much better.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. So the wastewater treatment division has been leading this work thus far at the county. We have been developing specifications for our projects. They're very sort of industrial in nature. And we have been integrating them into a few of our like big projects that we've been working on. None of them have gone into construction yet because they take years and years and years, but they are starting to really be integrated. We're going to be moving on to other materials besides cast in place concrete this year. The rest of the county is really just beginning to dig into this. We are actually kicking off today with Jordan from CLF. He is holding a workshop for our agencies to learn about embodied carbon. And so they will be developing those specs starting later this year. So we'll be seeing a sort of rollout for all of our agencies as we go over the next year or two. Some other big news we had was we received a climate pollution reduction grant from the US EPA. That total was about a little under 50 million. Of that is specifically for embodied carbon work, and that is to mainly support an FTE to work on embodied carbon efforts at the King County level, because right now it's sort of been whoever has capacity working on that. So we are really going to have a dedicated person who can help both within King County and other regional jurisdictions who are looking to do this as well. So we really want to help lead in the region. So that's going to be focusing both on the public project specifications, but also promoting embodied carbon requirements in local and state building codes and supporting industry participation in embodied carbon regulation materials testing. So we get that funding at the beginning of 2025. So we will be hiring for that position at the beginning of next year. So keep an eye out for that if you all are interested or want to share that with your network. And then sort of our last piece that we are working on is our strategic climate action plan. Our last one, which was our 2020, had embodied carbon requirements in it, and we are currently updating that for the 2025 strategic climate action plan. So that will continue to include embodied carbon requirements. We are looking to increase those, and that plan, which is a 5-year plan, will come out at the beginning, or will come out. We say Earth Day Q2, but don't hold us to that next year. It will come out early next year. So that's kind of what's coming up at King County. We are starting, we're working on it, and I think we're really going to start gaining momentum now that we have additional resources within the next couple of years.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. That's great. Great news moving forward. And now I'd like to call on Marian Jiang. I believe that I hope that's the way that you pronounce your last name, from the New York State Office of General Services, and focused on the embodied carbon planning and action around at the state level. Would you go right ahead, Marianne?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm a senior, oh, sorry, my camera. I'm a senior policy advisor at the Office of General Services for New York State. I lead our state's work on reducing embodied carbon in construction materials. This is my first time on this call, so some of you may already know what we're working on. So I'm sorry to repeat if you are already aware. We have two sets of guidance right now. We have our Executive Order 22 embodied carbon guidance, where we're asking our contracting agencies to collect information on the quantities of concrete, steel, glass, asphalt that they're procuring, and we're asking for EPDs where available. So we're using that sort of guidance to collect data, set some baselines, benchmark and look at sort of reduction strategies and targets. We have another set of guidance called the Buy Clean Concrete Guidelines. Those are specific to concrete, and they go into effect next January, and they have GWP limits by compressive strength. And those also require EPDs. So that'll be an update to that, sort of a step up from our Executive Order 22 guidelines, where we're actually requiring EPDs for concrete mixes. In addition, we're also working on a whole project LCA guidance together with ARIP and the Carbon Leadership Forum. So unclear exactly the timeline, but we are looking to develop guidelines for our state projects on how to reduce your whole project carbon. And looking forward to learning from many of you on that. We're also working towards supporting our agencies in developing performance-based specifications for concrete. And that's just in advance of us lowering our GWP limits for concrete come 2027. Beyond that, I think we also have a webinar series that everybody on this call is welcome to join. I'll stick the link in the chat, where we cover different topics like glass EPDs, steel EPDs, and things like that. I think that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Marianne. And our next person on the agenda, I've got Lauren Kubiak from NRDC. Give us an update on what you all are up to.
I'll jump in for Lauren. This is Michal Harmati from NRDC. And so I lead our state level industrial decarbonization work, and used to be a colleague of Marian Jiang's in New York State and moved over to NRDC earlier this year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in California, and then just touch on kind of some of our work in other states. So for California, I know I see some California folks here. We've been very involved in SB 596, which is California's zero cement legislation, which requires zero emission cement used in California by 2045. And that's for all cement used in the state, so both what's produced domestically in California and also imported from other states or internationally. So we've been pretty involved in providing comments to the California Air Resources Board team that has been leading on that. They are over a year overdue in releasing the framework for how that will be implemented. But we have been in close communication with them. And then most recently, participated in their workshop, the first workshop for AB 2446, which is the embodied carbon legislation. And that requires a 40% decrease in emissions from building materials by 2040. And also kind of, more importantly, I think in many ways, or just as importantly, the establishment of a framework for calculating those emissions reductions, including development of a baseline. So CARB held their first workshop on this. It's a different team than the SB 596 group, but working closely together a couple of weeks ago, and had a lot of questions about use of EPDs, data quality for EPDs, different baseline approaches, whole project LCA, how other data sources can be leveraged, whether a bottom up or bottom down analysis is best. So we are producing comments on that, and I imagine others on this call are too. Comments for AB 2446 are due tomorrow, and I'll drop a link in the chat in a minute. Oh, I see. Alexander beat me to it. Amazing. On how to do that. So happy to coordinate offline too if anyone on this call has particular comments that they want to include and or thoughts on what to include and are not planning to submit formal comments, we can incorporate them into ours. So ping me on the chat in order to do that, and I'll put my email in the chat too. And then in terms of other work that we're doing, we're part of the California Cement Decarb Coalition, again, along with other members on this call, and we're planning a convening in early November and a tour of an import terminal in Stockton, which I think will be pretty exciting, and thinking about what our strategy should be in California and other states going forward. So also would love to kind of hear if others are kind of strategizing in this space. And Lauren and I have both been part of putting on a series of low carbon concrete convenings together with RMI on behalf of the White House team, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and Council on Environmental Quality, building on the DOE's OSED IDP awards for cement. And we just had our last one in Boston last week, and there, and probably a few others who are not on camera right now. That was largely successful. And the first day was a Sublime ribbon cutting for Sublime for sidewalks out in front of a zero net carbon building in the Seaport area in Boston. And we had a pretty robust discussion at the convening the next day, thinking about how to get to 50% reduction from concrete and also 100% reduction in what might be needed on both the workforce and also sort of policy side. So I'm over my 2 minutes, but I'll just leave it there.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That was that's also just really inspiring. You all are at the center of a lot of really important work. And I want to tell everybody, we had 20 organizations say that they wanted to give brief reports this morning. And in most cases, I've been able to identify who those people are in the little boxes on the screen. In some cases, I may not find you if you're slated to speak, and so just let me know if I have not yet asked you to co-host the meeting. When you co-host the meeting, that means you're able to share your slides, and I don't have to manage all of that. So the next person on my list is Scott Shell from Climate Works Foundation. And Scott, I think I met you for the first time at Carbon Smart Building Day in San Francisco in September of 2018. It feels like a long time since has gone by, and a lot of important transitions have taken place in the world since 2018. But I've never forgotten our conversation, and I'm really happy to welcome you this morning. And let's hear about what Climate Works is up to.
Oh, that was a great event, Andrew. I remember that. Let's see. So I'm just going to focus on one issue today.
Scott, we're only seeing part of your slide.
Did that fix it? There's
a big gray or dark gray box on the right-hand side of your screen. I don't know what that's about.
Oh, geez. I thought I had fixed that.
Now it's just gone away. We're good now.
Okay. Okay, so I will stay in this PowerPoint mode just in case. So our industry program at ClimateWorks focuses on decarbonizing heavy industry. And for us, that's steel, cement and concrete, and chemicals. I'm going to talk about one of those today, concrete. Concrete is almost half of the embodied carbon in buildings, according to the fantastic CLF California Carbon Report. This is across all structural building types. And concrete is unlike other materials. It's a recipe And we can change that recipe at your local batch plant without having to build new plants. The thing I want to emphasize is that everybody thinks they're doing low carbon concrete, and you have to learn your numbers. So I pick 4,000 PSI concrete as the most common strength, and kind of mid 300s, the red circles here are what you often see as kind of benchmarks, kind of averages. And a lot of the low carbon standards tend to focus around, 284 for the GSA, 313 for Marin County, and so forth. I think we can go much lower, and I'm advocating that we go down to target 200 kilograms of CO2 per cubic meter. At the Minroad project, which 2 years ago piloted 12 different concrete mixes, their control mix started at just above 200 kilograms of CO2 per cubic meter, and the mixes go down from there. They had a minimum of type 1L cement with 30% SCM, so they're approaching 50% clinker replacement, which I think is a good target. If we look at the UK, these wavy lines are 5 percentile bands of actual concrete poured in the UK. That dotted line in the middle is the 50th percentile of concrete poured in the UK. So you can see at 4,000 PSI, it's about 240 kilograms of CO2. For comparison, I've put the GSA percentiles on there, the 50%, 40%, and 20th percentile. So they're well below the 20th percentile for GSA. I'm advocating to get down to 200. The National Ready Mix Concrete Association updated their roadmap recently when they got the big EPA grant. And I've converted from cubic yards to cubic meters with these red numbers. So in 2024, they're targeting 262 kilograms of CO2. And by 2028, 196. So this is the National Ready Mix Concrete Association. If you haven't come across Dr. Tyler Lay on YouTube, you've got to Google the guy. He's Concrete Crazy Man, and his tarantula curve is definitely worth watching. He's advocating for 210 to 180 in one of his presentations. And then there was recently a series of test pours at the White House convening in Chicago, part of the Open Compute demonstration projects. And you can see these mixes here. Their control mix was at 280, and then they have mixes at 195, 158, and 120. So you can't just go out and do this without any preparation. You have to do your test mixes. You have to do some trial pours. You have to make sure you can finish it and pump it and everything else. But these materials are possible. They are being done today, and ClimateWorks is advocating for people to be as ambitious as possible. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Scott. And next person on our agenda is Craig Wallach from the Concrete Masonry and Hardscapes Association. Go ahead, Craig.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, great. Let me share. So just a quick update from last time we talked. We have issued our first industry average EPD for CMU. It covers a variety of strength ranges and density ranges, right? With CMU, it's not only strength, but also we sell stuff over a whole range of densities. And with that, this is just a summary of the data. We won't go over that, but one thing I did want to point out, this is available on the ASTM EPD. They're the ones who published it, and it's on their website. But one thing we have done is, and last time I talked about it, how dry cast actually sequesters a significant amount of carbon dioxide just by its very nature about being open, much more than ready mix. And so our top line numbers incorporate the sequestration up to 28 days, is which we consider to be the gate. From as soon as you make them and you stack them up in the yard and before they get to the job, or as your ability to, at that point, they're absorbing about 21% of the potential calcination carbon emissions. We have included a supplemental information section at the back of the EPD that explains that, and then also points out that at 2 years of service, if you're doing LCAs, we have data to show that it's equivalent to 49% of the calcination carbonation emissions, right? So it gives you a net global warming potential. So we're kind of excited about that being out there. We continue to do a bunch of research. We're partnering with MIT, Concrete Sustainability Hub to model our data. There's very good models out there, and there's some calculators on the CS Hub website for ready mix, but there's really not fundamental data on dry cast. So we are going to go in and take the models and get the fundamental data for dry cast. And I started we had done CMU, we're now doing pavers. So I started a project in July where we have a couple different mixes, and we have them exposed under controlled conditions, shelter conditions outside, and then exposed conditions outside. That's exciting. That's also going to be modeled by MIT. We're monitoring temperature, humidity, and carbon dioxide concentrations so that we can get the fundamental models right. We're just starting our PCR for 2025, the development of it. We are going to send out notices for the who's on the committee. There'll be about 20, 22 people on the committee. We're going to start work in November. We're excited about that, and we plan to include sequestration and carbonation for dry cast, because we are partnering with the low carbon concrete technologies. They're very much into the dry cast because we do have the open structure. We do have the chambers that we cure in. So it's ready made for these new technologies that carbonate or use new materials that carbonate during curing. So we'll include all that also in the PCR. So for doing EPDs, and look at all the boundary conditions around that. If you're using waste CO2, or you're getting whatever source you have, take that in, but also all the losses and all the stuff that you have to deal with to get the right accounting on that. So we're excited about doing that. We continue to work with NEU at ACI on their materials validation and verification of these new technologies. We're continuing our work with building transparency on their EC3 modeling to get the dry cast, especially masonry, is kind of a weird thing, right? And we have 8 by 8 by 16 blocks, but they're not really that size. They're 3/8 inch smaller, plus they've got some hollow in it, and then you got grout, and then you got your rebar. So we've worked with them to hone the models that are behind their modeling, and we're working with others on theirs. And we're continuing to participate with the NIST Low Carbon Cement Concrete Consortium, and I'm leading a task group on setting guidelines, hopefully to get an ASTM guide on how to properly measure, accurately measure carbon uptake of hardened concretes. So we're doing all that, and we're getting some resources out there for the design community. So that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig. And as we move forward, I just want to remind everybody, keep an eye on the clock, and we want to try to restrict reports to about 2 to 3 minutes. So the next person on our list here is Erin McDade from Architecture 2030. Go right ahead, Erin.
Sounds good. And I will try to be as fast as absolutely possible. Great. So I am sharing some of the highlights from a 2-year collaboration with Climate Positive Design and Architecture 2030 that just wrapped up. And we produced a host of new and updated tools and resources as a result. We haven't even sent out our official announcement about these yet, so you all are getting a little sneak preview. And like I said, a few of the highlights include a climate action planning for the built environment framework that we developed by taking basically every climate action plan and climate action planning document out there that we could find that related to the built environment. And we consolidated that into a comprehensive but pretty straightforward 10-step climate action planning framework that is applicable to any building sector professional and is focused on meeting not just adaptation or not just mitigation, but adaptation goals as well. And I will put the links for all of these in the chat when I'm finished. The second thing we just published, I'm really excited about this one, is a decarbonization framework for planning landscape and infrastructure. So it's really focused on beyond the building or the exterior built environment and on reducing embodied carbon specifically. And this, I'll give you a little preview of what is in it based on the table of contents, but it's a framework for basically comprehensive exterior built environment decarbonization through the planning and policy lens. You can see we've framed it around should we build, how much should we build, where should we build, and how should we build. And each of these sections comes with existing policy precedents. So the whole framework has about 35 existing policy precedents that people can build on to implement these decarbonization planning and policy mechanisms. And then another highlight is that for those of you familiar with one of our oldest and most loved tools, the 2030 palette, we collaborated with Climate Positive Design to create a host of new swatches for the 2030 palette. A little snapshot, we added ones like afforestation and coastal seaforestation drawdown to really expand the palette beyond the built environment to be looking at landscapes and infrastructure and planning, which all have a heavy embodied carbon focus. And that is it. That was very fast. And I'm going to put those in the chat and pass on to the next person.
That was admirable, Erin. Excellent job of moving forward and moving fast and delivering a lot of rich information in a brief period of time. So the next person I've got on my agenda is, hold on just a second. I've got Sonia Auclair from Sound Transit in Washington State. And I want to just say, last weekend, my wife and I got on the train on the light rail in the University District, and we went all the way to Linwood just for the adventure of it all. So tell us something more about what Sound Transit is doing to address embodied carbon.
Hello, so I'm Sonia Claire with Sound Transit, and just for those on this call who are not familiar with Sound Transit and not from the Seattle kind of Puget Sound area, Sound Transit is a young regional transit agency, having only been established in 1996 to serve the central Puget Sound. It is building the largest expansion in the country, spanning 3 counties and projected at a cost of $54 billion. Operations and development include regional rail, light rail, and bus services. And it's covering over 116 miles. Sound Transit's Link, which is our light rail, is the largest light rail district. And we also have the longest average bus rides. And this all is serving a population of about 3.3 million people, and with over 3.7 boardings per month that Sound Transit is tracking. As you can imagine, building a new light rail system uses significant amounts of carbon-intensive materials such as concrete and steel. And due to Washington's Climate Commitment Act, for many years, the agency has been reducing its operational emissions. And in 2023, we attained a 34% reduction of operational emissions over a 2018 baseline. With reducing its embodied carbon, we are still in the early stages of calculating and reducing it. And we are kind of targeting kind of the big ones right now, which are carbon and concrete and steel. On station parking garage projects, because we are sort of regional, we have a lot of parking garages as part of these expansion projects. We are collecting EPDs on concrete and requiring an embodied carbon reduction of at least 25 to 35% for the concrete. And we have achieved reductions of 20 to 33% on 4 parking garages that have opened in the last year. And those were in development earlier when the percentages were slightly lower. And now we've raised them in recent years in future projects. On larger light rail expansion projects, we are piloting LCA calculations for the stations and maintenance facilities that go along with those expansion and stations. And while we are more familiar with operational emissions reductions, we're newer to those LCA calculations and reducing embodied carbon emissions. And so many of our targets and practices right now are still in the piloting and sort of exploration phase. And if you were kind of exploring, our main objectives right now are exploring ways to reduce those embodied carbon in design requirements, specification, and through third-party certifications. So we're also, in addition to LEED and Envision certifications, we're also starting to explore the possibility of looking at the zero carbon certifications as well throughout the different systems. And then we're also exploring sort of what materials we're going to be able to track and actually make impact on, beyond concrete and steel. What's the next kind of big item we can tackle? And as well as finessing those materials we're already tracking and trying to get them lower than what we currently are achieving. One challenge that we have and are hoping to connect with you all on is accounting for the lower LCA in those operational greenhouse gas emissions reductions, because they're kind of apples to oranges in comparison. But currently, that's how we have to report them and track them, is through how do we discuss our lowering our emissions through more embodied carbon through the lens of, an operational reporting structure. And to be able to communicate that progress to the community, to other agencies, and to officials. One example of this is increasing renewable diesel use in buses. So this is reducing some of that embodied carbon, but also it kind of is not quite be able to be reflected in some of our reporting structures. So that's sort of what is going on at Sound Transit right now. And thank you. Looking forward to connecting with you all.
Thank you for joining us this morning, Sonia. It's inspiring to hear what Sound Transit is doing. Really remarkable on a massive project. The next person I'd like to call on is all the way from Kenya, Cecilia Wandiga from the Center for Science and Technology Innovations. And I know, I think also on the call this morning is Nixon Odieno, who's also from Kenya and works closely with Cecilia. So Cecilia, you want to go ahead, and Nixon, you can join in as appropriate.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Let me just, here we go. So we've been working to try and just get this type of dialogue registered in local practice and local nomenclature. One of the things that came about is Chartered Institute of Buildings. And for those not familiar with the British system, after you finish graduation, it's just like joining a formal membership association. So they become very interested in not only just the embodied carbon discussions, but also what are the local voices towards decarbonization and which pathways. So I'll put the link in the chat. We're going to have our first joint webinar. We're really excited. We're going to look at it from the structural engineering perspective, and we've shared Carbon Leadership's Forum Policy Toolkit and looking at building density and unit density and how so there'll be part of that discussion. And then also looking at just the regular irrespective of the type of concrete, like we have Institute for Cement and Concrete at Mary University looking at LC3, but we know there'll also be regular concrete used in these transitions. So they're going to use regular resistance probes. ICRETE is using regular resistance probes. They're working with the Kenya Highway Transportation Authority, and just to figure out how these concrete is setting. Are we getting the mixes right as we entities try to reduce concrete amounts? And also we have a lot of risk of building collapse and failure, and that's been traced to the concrete mix. So you're all invited, and let oh, sorry, switch over in stop here in case Nixon wants to say anything else.
Hello, Nixon. Are you there?
Hello, I'm on transit. Yes, great to be with you. Just to highlight also one work program that is just begun. Kenya has begun working on a building decarbonization roadmap, and this brings coalitions of different actors within the building and climate action space, convened by the State Department of Public Works and different industry stakeholders, including Global Building Performance Network. So the work has already begun with a workshop, stakeholders forum, and this week, working groups have been formed and are looking at different elements of the building decarbonization agenda, right for materials, efficiency planning issues, enabling environments that has to do with the policy, capacity issues. So we are going to be working on this over the next 2 months, starting off with the baseline assessments of the current status and target setting. And we would be glad to learn from the network what others are doing, and also glad to share the experiences. But particularly myself, I'll be leading or convening the working group on efficiency, and we are keen to look at both, not only the traditional operational efficiency or the operational carbon, but also to look at embodied carbon and how that can be integrated into the building decarbonization agenda. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us from such a long distance. I think you get the award for coming the farthest distance to one of these meetings. So thanks a lot, Cecilia and Nixon. Next on our agenda is Jacqueline Hart from the International Living Futures Institute. And Jacqueline, take it away.
Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm our Senior Manager of Energy and Carbon at ILFI. And a few quick updates from ILFI. We're excited to have contributed to the ECHO project, as others already mentioned, and have provided input on the DOE's national definition of zero emission buildings, and excited to incorporate the findings from both of those into our standards. We're also in the midst of developing a new project type called existing buildings. This is an effort that a few clients came together to help fund that we're excited about. And it's in an effort to have pathways for existing buildings seeking certifications without major capital investments or major renovations. So we anticipate that this will be especially helpful for portfolio clients and others that are trying to bring a whole group of projects up to zero carbon standards. And in the spring, we published our 0.1 updates. So Living Building Challenge 4.1, Zero Carbon Certification 1.1, Zero Energy Certification 1.1. And All of those are free on our website. The screen will just ask for your name, email address, things like that. And then once you submit it, you can access it free of charge. And from those updates, our education team has updated our Living Future accreditation and also added some mini courses if your team doesn't want to go through the whole process. And as a reminder, the Living Future accreditation is all virtual, all at your own pace, and has small quizzes along the way, but it's a little bit different than Lean, where it doesn't have the tests at the end. So it's hopefully it's as accessible as possible to folks wanting to learn more. And then lastly, I'll try to be a little bit quick here. In 2 weeks, we have our Affordable Housing Summit, and we invite you all to join. I'll put the links for that and the other things I'm talking about in the chat. So that's October 24th and 25th. It's virtual, and it will highlight some of the really exciting work of practitioners integrating community culture, sustainability within a rapidly decarbonizing sector, including healthier materials, accessible materials, and a lot more. We also have tons of other guidance and guidebooks on our website for affordable housing, so feel free to check those out if you have any projects that are affordable housing. And then the last two are to note that if any of you are attending Green Build next month, a few of us will be there, so feel free to reach out if you want to meet up. And for our own conference in the spring, early bird pricing is available, and that will be May 6th through 8th in Portland, Oregon.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, and I'm especially excited about the new existing buildings typology. That sounds like a real step forward for ILFI and for lots of folks who look to ILFI for leadership and support.
Thanks.
The next person on our agenda is Willie Carlson from WRI. Please go right ahead, Willie.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share some rapid fire recent developments from the past 2 quarters. I think we missed the last meeting here. The WRI Industrial Decarbonization and Carbon Dioxide Removal team has been very busy and published several articles over the past 6 months. We published 2 articles focused on cement decarbonization. One of them was discussing the need for increased use of blended cements in the US. And then another one was analyzing the low carbon cement projects that are being developed in the US and the current state of those projects and companies. We also recently published an article about the 45V clean hydrogen tax credit, discussing the debate surrounding that tax credit. Clean hydrogen can be used to reduce embodied carbon in iron and steel. I'll be sharing the link to that as well in the chat. And then we also published statements on the Impact Act, the Impact Act 2.0 bills, as well as a project update on the Impact Act 2.0. These are bipartisan bills focused on decarbonizing the cement, concrete, and asphalt sectors through R&D and green procurement policies like advanced market commitments. And then actually just yesterday, the WRI industrial team, in collaboration with the global energy team, published an article discussing the need for greater international collaboration on industrial decarbonization. So we're very excited about that. And aside from articles, some of you may receive the monthly Forum for International Green Industry newsletter. And for those who don't know, WRI's industry team organizes the Forum for International Green Industry, or FIGI, which aims to share knowledge on international decarbonization efforts. We're still sending that out monthly, and this month we'll be sending out a special edition debriefing all of the significant international industrial decarbonization related developments that are coming from Climate Week in New York City and the Clean Energy Ministerial in Brazil. And in addition, you can follow the LinkedIn page to receive more timely updates and comment on recent developments. And I'll share all of the links to those things in the chat and pass it off to the next person. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Willie. And by the way, I'd like to note that this meeting, we've been going now for 5 years with the NGO Government Roundtable on embodied carbon beginning in September of 2019. Today's meeting marks a record number of organizations presenting, a record number of organizations participating, and a record number of people on the call by a good 40% more. So that is a really wonderful thing to celebrate. It feels like we're in the middle of a qualitative shift in the industry understanding and potential action on embodied carbon. So that is just really great. Our next presenters, we've got two folks from the International Institute for Sustainable Laboratories, I2SL. Gordon Sharp and Dirk von Below are both in the meeting. Gordon, you want to take it away?
Sure. So what we wanted to talk about today was our program for basically trying to accelerate the decarbonization of the world's laboratories. It's something we call Labs to Zero. It's basically a 6-part program. It's something we started in 2022. And basically we hope to finish it and get all the elements in place by 2026. We're sort of halfway through the program, putting it in place. What it has is a lab benchmarking tool, something actually it's been in place for about 15 years, but now we're basically enhancing it. It covers basically energy, operational emissions, and now embodied carbon, which we'll talk about a little bit more. We also have a scorecard similar to like an Energy Star certification. Laboratories aren't covered by Energy Star, so we've sort of filling the gap there, but not just in energy, but also operational emissions and eventually embodied carbon scoring. We're then going to be certifying those scores. We're going to be adding training to it. And then we have a very unique thing, which is we call the AIM report and Design to Zero, which are basically like automated level 1 audits to help people understand how they can decarbonize their laboratories with various measures to cover both energy, operational emissions, and eventually also embodied carbon. So the laboratory benchmarking tool is something, again, it's the world's largest lab energy database. Now we've got over 1,200 lab buildings in there, over 200 million square feet of lab space, something we developed in conjunction with the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories. It's a community crowdsourced database, so you can enter your data in there basically, and then on a periodic basis, we'll go through, anonymize the data and add it to our peer database so you can compare your buildings against other buildings. It's free to use. You can see I'll put into the chat the URL for that. And one of the recent developments was adding embodied carbon. So now we can also benchmark not just operational energy or emissions, but also embodied carbon. And again, what we're trying to do is collect enough data that in addition to doing benchmarking, we'll also be able to give a score, basically, again, like a 1 to 100 sort of percentile-based score indicating how you're doing in terms of embodied carbon versus your peers. So this is pretty exciting. I don't think anyone out there is doing any embodied carbon benchmarking or scoring. Obviously, this is definitely for laboratories, but perhaps for other buildings as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dirk, who's going to talk more about the embodied carbon benchmarking.
Yeah, good morning. We're excited to be here. We wanted to share that we got some good interaction with Brad Benke from CLF to build up our schema for this new expanded database. Obviously, we're asking architects and owners to provide LCA data and project information. If you go to the next slide, Gordon, the one big focus we have is really to look at structural information. We are really looking very carefully at our own information, how the structural design drives laboratory design. You may understand that the laboratories often have very stringent vibration restrictions and other heavy loads that need to be really supported by the structure, which really increase the amount of carbon in concrete and steel that's really applied in these buildings. So we're really trying to understand how can we help architects and engineers and owners drive down these loads and improve the design, make them more efficient, reduce really essentially the weight of the buildings. Next slide. The LCA technologies that we use are really very similar to LEED and also what CLF prescribes. We're really exciting to learn about the new schema that you guys developed, and we'll be looking very carefully at that and try to harmonize our databases together. Here you see a first view really of how many labs we have. We have about 55 laboratories that provided LCA data, and we really hope to reach out and reach more people to know about this and use the benchmarking tool. Again, as Gordon said, it's totally free to use, and there's a lot of support around it that you can request that we'll be glad to help you. So thank you very much for inviting us and having us today. This was a wonderful opportunity, and spread the word.
Thanks much, Dirk. I really appreciate that. And one quick thought, what you just said about the intention of your organization and of the tool to align with the categories listed in the data schema published by the ECHO project. That's just a perfect example of what we hope will be happening across the industry as people come into alignment from a wide variety of different organizations and initiatives and practical efforts to address embodied carbon. So thank you for that. The next person on our agenda is from the Minnesota Bike Clean Task Force. Richard's had to leave early, but Natalie Georgia, or Georgieff, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is here with us. Do you want to take it away, Natalie?
Sure. Let me share my screen. And you got close. It's Natalie Georgieff.
Georgieff.
Close.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie Georgieff. I'm a researcher at this University of Minnesota Center for Sustainable Building Research. I'll be speaking on behalf of Richard Graves, who is the director of the center, about Minnesota's progress in Bike Clean. Minnesota is one of several states that are part of the federal Bike Clean partnership. And as we work on implementation of our Bike Clean program, we're excited to coordinate and align with everyone else who's also working on embodied carbon and Bike Clean. So a little bit of history. Our Bike Clean Task Force legislation was signed by Governor Walz in August of 2023. And then what came out of that was in October of 2023, a task force was formed that's led by commissioners of the Department of Administration and the Department of Transportation. And so we're really focusing on all of the issues that are surrounding implementation of the program and how we can set GWP limits in the coming years. Here, I won't read all the text in the interest of time, but this is language from our legislation with some of the goals and objectives laid out for us for the next several years, starting with our first legislative report due in December 2025. And then our first, I think the timeline I'll show next will show kind of what's coming in the next few years. So here are all of the members currently on the Bike Clean Task Force. I won't read everyone's names, but I think the main point of this is we've engaged a lot of stakeholders from different trade organizations, industry organizations, the design world, manufacturers, construction firms, and environmental groups in the hopes of kind of having a really robust group to help ensure implementation goes as smoothly as possible and every person has a voice. And so here's our timeline kind of laid out for the next several years. Earlier this year, we had some context setting meetings on materials, talked about bidding procurement databases. And then in July, we started our pilot program, which includes a handful or more of buildings projects and several roadway projects to examine embodied carbon in specific materials, including concrete, asphalt, steel, and then some other materials, and rebar, and some other materials as well. And then over the summer, we've been convening in working groups for each of the materials that I just mentioned, as well as the pilot program. And I think we've got about 4 more meetings over the next year or 6 months, where we'll be working through the recommendations that have come from each of the material working groups. And so in spring, we're hoping to kind of finalize recommendations, draft up our report, and then, like I said, submit our first legislative report in December 2025, and then kind of every year thereafter until 2028. And I'll just touch briefly on this report. CSBR partnered with Carbon Leadership Forum to publish this report, legislative report in 2022, which kind of laid the groundwork for how a policy could be implemented, which is, I think, a really important part of how this process went and how this was enacted into policy. And then I'll touch also a little bit on Minnesota's B3 guidelines, which have been around for, I believe, 20 plus years. And it's B3 stands for Buildings, Benchmarks, and Beyond. And originally, the dream was to be able to benchmark buildings, but as we all know on the call, that's easier said than done, and there's a lot of challenges, especially because the B3 guidelines LCA requirements, there's several different pathways. Anyways, we have over 400 plus projects, and these are all projects that are funded by general obligation bonds. So any new construction or major renovation that's funded by general obligation bonds is required to follow this program. And it goes from pre-design all the way through 10 years of building operations. And then these are the main areas of focus for sustainability that are covered in the guidelines currently: performance management, site and water, energy and atmosphere, indoor environmental quality, and materials and waste. And right now, the policy is focusing on EPDs, but we hope to have a more comprehensive embodied carbon approach as we move forward, including whole building LCA, design guidelines, and EPDs are kind of the first step, hopefully, in establishing some way to compare embodied carbon between buildings or between materials as a start. And we explored some different structures for setting limits, but it seems like from the working groups and the task force meetings, we're looking more like it's closer to option 2, where we set an initial target and then course correct and adjust as the market shifts. And then this graphic I like because we can kind of see which states are involving which materials in their policy. And you'll notice, concrete, asphalt, structural steel, we all know everyone's doing those. But we're exploring some of these other materials in our working groups as well to see how we might incorporate those. And then finally, as a part of our other materials working group, we're putting together some studies and analysis for different options for building bays to try to hone in on what the biggest materials are in terms of embodied carbon impact in some of our typical building types. And so, yeah, more to follow. There's a lot in development, and yeah, thanks for having us.
Great, thank you so much, Natalie. And next person on the agenda is Kaylee Howd from the MEP 2040 commitment. Kaylee works for Borough Happel as well, but is the steering committee kind of chair for MEP 2040. So Kaylee, let us know what's up with MEP 2040.
Andrew. MEP 2040 has been working on creating a guide for measuring MEP embodied carbon specifically, since MEP is one of the few disciplines that actually embodies whole life carbon in total. So within this guide that we will be releasing by the end of this year, we're hoping to mid-November, this guide will encompass a specific set of instructions on A1 to A3 and how to measure that, the categories that we felt were important to measure across MEP systems, including piping, ductwork wiring, different types of equipment, geothermal, plumbing fixtures. We just added in vertical transportation as well as a deep dive case study around how to measure embodied carbon when you do that on a project and looking at how that works, as well as walking through every one of the life cycle stages A4 through D and having consistency in how to do that for all life cycle stages. So you can see what the guide walks through in terms of the takeoffs, how you'd kind of step inside of the mind of an electrical engineer, how exciting that sounds, in terms of how you do some of those takeoffs for wiring and conduit, what you'd look for in terms of pitfalls, what might be missing in terms of modeled assets that you'd pull out, how to get from wires to conduit, and then looking at materials, those tend not to be modeled or stated specifically. So what defaults you might use for different takeoffs, and then what are some of the embodied carbon values you might see around different materials. And then looking at the case study that we're using here, trying to establish functional equivalence between buildings, because if you're designing a building in San Diego versus Chicago, you would have a really different functional equivalence between those buildings. Building a lab building versus building an academic building, you'd also have really different expectations in terms of what the whole life carbon might be. Also displaying what those whole building results are. We actually walk through that A to D, but you'd see that in the case study for A1 to A3, and then breaking down M versus E versus P, FP, what those results are. And then walking through A4 through D, how to do that stage by stage, how you'd go about the calculations, having easy to understand methodologies around that, because some people may not have ever done a refrigerant calculation for B1 before. And then looking at replacements, because MEP systems are not just an upfront problem. You replace those systems 2 to 3 times throughout the life of your building. So actually all of that upfront embodied carbon doubles and triples sometimes throughout the life of your building. So really consolidating all of those industry references for you. And then we end the report with some calls to action around getting more EPDs, better EPDs for MEP, and just looking at the number of EPDs you need to have. A call to action around getting more benchmark studies. We looked at one case study in here. It's not enough. Lots of different MEP systems and buildings, and then a call to action around MEP being included in certifications policies around the US. There's so much carbon in MEP systems. We really need MEP systems to be thought of in this whole life carbon space in the US specifically. But I think getting them into certifications and policies is next step. But we do need those benchmarking studies to understand kind of where they'll be falling in terms of the embodied carbon numerical value. So something we're really looking forward to as a group. So we'll share that with all of you when the guidance does come out.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kaylee. And I do want to take exception to something that you said about the minds of mechanical engineers. As a member of the MEP 2040 steering committee, I've been hanging out with a bunch of mechanical engineers recently, and I find that their brains are extremely interesting.
Glad you think so, Andrew.
All right. So Brad Neese is on the line here from the GSA. Brad, you want to give us an update?
Yeah, Andrew, I do. And in fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to also give a little brief update on ASHRAE ICC Standard 240.
Oh, yes, please.
Upcoming standard for quantification of life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. The one thing I want to share about that is that the committee members are working diligently to resolve the public comments we received, and we are still hoping that it will be available for code adoption once we publish it next year. So look forward for more information to come on that. And for GSA, I've got a quick brief update, and some of you may have heard this in the announcement last week at one of the low carbon concrete convenings that I think Scott Shell mentioned. The administrator made an announcement, and so what we've seen through our program, our IRA low embodied carbon program, American manufacturers are rising to the occasion. They continue to do so. As we noted in our 1-year anniversary of our IRA LAC program, there were 17,000 EPDs that have been issued in that 12-month period. And so moving forward, what GSA is going to do is we're going to have even stronger demand signal through our work to the marketplace. We're going to start preferencing best-in-class 20% in markets where our research indicates that material is readily available. We've got a good amount of research we've been doing over the past 18 months, and we feel that where possible, project teams can support that preference for best-in-class top 20%. And then we're also going to be giving extra credit in the bidding process to companies who can offer the lowest carbon clean material in their bid. So the company that's offering the lowest best-in-class material will get an extra credit. So the goal that we have by doing these things is to continue to be clear about the standards we want to see, but also reward folks who have gone the extra mile to make a bigger impact.
Great, thanks, Brad. And in addition, we might also just note that ASHRAE's TM65 has just been released as well, which is an embodied carbon and building services calculation methodology. And that's a really interesting and important release. Next on the agenda, we've got Monica Schrader from Build Change. Monica, you want to take it over?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. There are 2 updates that I want to share. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, Build Change, we work on disaster and climate resilient housing globally. And so embodied carbon has a lot to do with our implementation of programs worldwide. The first one is a long overdue update because I was on maternity leave for a lot of the last year. But at late last year, we published a study on embodied carbon. It's saving embodied carbon through strengthening existing housing. I just put the link in the chat, and that makes the case that improving existing housing against the impacts of disasters and climate can actually save embodied carbon as opposed to new construction in the same location. And this is based on a data set from Build Change's own projects. And a pretty lengthy review of that data set that we did over the last few years. So if you haven't already seen that report, please take a look. And this is focused entirely on the housing sector and on programs that we have implemented. The other very short update, and I think I'm going to stay under 2 minutes, is that we have been implementing a program in the Philippines in partnership with Wholesome on how, applying this principle of incrementally improving and retrofitting housing structurally for climate and disaster resilience, but also, further reducing the carbon footprint of this through using low carbon materials. And so that has been underway for a little while now, and we completed the first round of houses. It was 37, I believe. And then we're continuing on that partnership. So you can see a little bit of how that has worked in practice to employ a lot of the concepts and the research that you all are doing into practice in our programs in the Global South. And the last thing is that I will be at COP. If there's anybody that's keen to talk about embodied carbon while at COP, do feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat and would love to meet you there.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Monica. And now our final presenter, we have this morning Bill Horton from the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine. Please take it away and tell us all about what that's an amazing acronym. It's over the top. So let us know what's behind the acronym.
Thank you, Andrew, and thanks all. It's an honor to be here, and I'm really inspired by the work that you're all doing. I'm sort of going to be hoping to engage maybe on a slightly different wavelength here, which is the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine is an NSF engine that if you're familiar with National Science Foundation engines, they're oftentimes focused on creating economic development. But in this case, economic development specific to sustainability in the desert Southwest. So I'm coming to you from Phoenix, where it's still way too hot. There is a water focus and an energy systems focus, but also a carbon focus. And the carbon focus of SWISI, or the Southwest Sustainability Innovation Engine, includes carbon drawdown, direct air capture, but also includes reducing embodied carbon. Effectively, what we are given the opportunity to do through the engine is to identify partners to whom we can distribute some of this NSF grant funding to help accelerate either the development of technologies or material systems, the adoption of technologies or material systems, and or capacity building, including workforce development around the dissemination of those technologies or material systems. So I'll give you a couple of really quick examples. There is an ultra low carbon concrete partner that we've already brought in through the engine who needed some support with adoption readiness of their technologies. So some funding from the engine is going to support scaling, capacity building for that organization. There's another group that we're working with that manufactures bio-based phase change materials to reduce the operational energy in building systems. They've got some challenges with their product, and we're working with them and sharing support with them to help expand the adoptability of their technologies. So in a great way, we've got folks here on the call who are working across the built environment. Many of you are aware of a lot of technologies that you'd like to be able to specify or use or adopt in your own practices that are maybe either not yet at the technology readiness level that they need to get to. So maybe they need test bed support. That's something that we can offer. Or maybe they're struggling with adoption readiness of their products or systems, or need workforce development to build capacity around the great work that they're trying to do. And we're looking to connect with those folks to sort of engage them through the engine and to potentially share funding with them to help them get to a point where those really important either material systems or technologies can be adopted. So I've put in the chat my email address as well as a link to the Southwest Innovation Sustainability Innovation Engine. Hope to follow up with many of you after the call to identify those folks who are trying to create these really disruptive material and energy system or technology systems, and to potentially support them and help them make a bigger impact in the embodied carbon space in the built environment.
Great. Thank you so much, Philip. And that concludes our meeting this morning. We'll be developing notes on the meeting, including all the links that people put into the chat window, as well as the video recording, and make that available relatively within the next few days, I would guess. In the meantime, thank you all for attending, and we'll see you all in, let's see, October, November, December, January. I'll be sending out an announcement of the date in January next week. So thanks a lot for attending, and we'll see you all in the future. Bye.